All right, welcome everyone. Good afternoon, and thank you for joining SEF today for our Racial Equity Leadership Network informational webinar. Just a few housekeeping items for today's webinar. We will have 2 periods set aside today for questions, broken up towards the end of the webinar. If you would like to ask a question of our panelists, please feel free to submit a question at any time, but just type your request in that chat window there to the bottom right and direct it to all panelists in that drop-down menu. We'll collect all the questions that you give us throughout the webinar, and we'll answer them in those question and answer periods. Also, we'd like to remind you all registrants will receive an email including a link to our webinar recordings, and the recording will be available within 24 to 48 hours of this event. Feel free to please share the recording link that will be in that email, share it with your network and prospective candidates. And without any further ado, I'd like to turn it over to Dr. Austin.
Good afternoon, and I will just reiterate thanks again for joining us. I'm Leah Austin, and I serve as the Vice President of Programs here at the Southern Education Foundation. I'm also joined by Dr. Carol Johnson, who is a former school superintendent and is currently serving as the Southern Regional Executive Director for New Leaders. She has worked with us in an advisory capacity to develop the network that we will talk about today. So just want to thank her again for being able to join us. And let me just offer a quick reminder that this is an overview of the opportunity. If you have questions specific to your application, we'd ask that you email us, and there's some contact information at the end of the presentation, just because we know with the amount of time that we have, we won't have enough time to address each of those issues, potentially. But before we start into the overview of the network, let me just provide some background information regarding the Southern Education Foundation. So as you can see on the slide, our actual mission is there, which I will not read to you word for word, but just want to highlight a couple things. So one, the Southern Education Foundation has been a long-standing advocate of educational equity for a very long time. We're going to be celebrating our 150th anniversary next year. And what we want to really, kind of highlight in this is that for us, in terms of advancing our mission, we really see working to support education leaders as critical to this work. And so that's why we're actually launching this Racial Equity Leadership Network. Funded by the Atlantic Philanthropies, the Racial Equity Leadership Network is an 18-month fellowship program designed for school district leaders across the South who are interested in building their capacity to address disparities in race and income in an authentic and sustainable way. Over the course of 18 months, fellows will attend 5 in-person sessions focused on essential levers for equity leadership and system transformation. Each cohort of the network will be comprised of 10 fellows who will also have an in-home or at-home design team. Sessions will take place over a 2-day span. Locations of these sessions will be determined based on the geographic makeup of the cohort, but you should note that session 1 is going to take place in Atlanta as the kind of kickoff session. Let me also just share with you that in terms of participation in the program, there is no cost to the candidate or to the district. So we will be able to provide for travel, lodging, and meals during the convenings. The only thing we ask that candidates invest in is really coming prepared with their best thinking and the commitment to each of the sessions that we mentioned. In terms of the goals, so our goals for this network are that fellows will really be able to engage and enlist allies in addressing the factors in the education system that contribute to existing disparities in well-being and learning outcomes. We also hope that fellows will be able to leverage data, to leverage their role, authority, and their personal courage in order to influence improvements in policy and practice. And lastly, we are hoping for a broader adoption of equity-centered policy and practices across the South that will give rise to student well-being and deeper learning outcomes for children. So given those goals and information we've shared thus far in terms of the actual sort of requirements of the opportunity or of the experience, we wanted to list some of what we consider to be program benefits. And so the one that, we think is one of the most significant is time and space. Knowing that leaders, knowing that these fellows just don't really always have that time and space allotted to them. And so here we think fellows will have a chance to step away from their daily pressures and demands to engage and reflect thoughtfully and share intellectually and practically as education leaders. Another unique element is the peer network. So we know that this is extremely difficult work, and we want to build a mechanism for leaders to have both the cover and protection that they need, and we think that comes in the form of peer networks, really having folks that are not only experiencing this with you, but can support you as you're attempting to endeavor in some really complicated and difficult work at times. We also think that access to, as we put here, exclusive networking and learning opportunities, the way we're really looking at that or seeing that is that, one, we think it's important for leaders to be able to be linked to other innovative and interesting thinkers, and really to help school district leaders see themselves as thought leaders and have the opportunity to bridge and kind of influence the field with their own intellect and expertise. A couple of other benefits that we'd like to just lift up for you are the Racial Equity in Action Inquiry Cycle, which is really like a capstone project is one way to think about it. And so fellows will receive support identifying a challenge, designing an approach, executing a strategy, and then will have the opportunity to report back to their peers on any progress and lessons learned from putting that cycle, that inquiry cycle, into play. Lastly, in-district coaching and technical assistance. So we would like to make sure that we can support fellows with a variety of resources. So as we said, it could be coaching, it might be technical assistance. In some cases, we'll be able to provide a mini-grant monetary resources. An example would be, and we've heard this from superintendents and from leaders that we talk to as we were designing the program, and one strategy that came up that people wanted support on was communication support. And so folks said, this is a complicated issue and not everybody in our broad community, and that can be defined in many ways, will understand it. And so how could you help us to actually engage with community members in new ways about issues like equity issues? And so that's an area where we're hoping we can provide support to folks. So let me talk a little bit about what the sessions look like. So again, there are 5 sessions over an 18-month period, and these sessions will occur over 2 days. So each session will focus on a different lever of change, and as you can see here, we've named sort of broadly what those levers are. But what I'd like to do is just with each session sort of give you some sense of how we're thinking about the content of that session, right? So taking you a little bit deeper than these broad levers. And so, for example, in session 1 where we say equity, leadership, and complex systems, well, what we want to do is really provide the time and space, again, for leaders to ask themselves, so what does it mean for me to really lead for equity? And what are the challenges that I'm committed to addressing and really putting forth some energy and thinking and creating my design team to actually go back and work on. In session 2, we're really wanting leaders to, ask the question, how do we reimagine school systems, right? We have outcomes, we have transformative outcomes that we really want to see, and so how would we go about reimagining, potentially even needing to redesign a school system to be able to produce those transformative outcomes. Regarding leveraging policy, how does a district, and I say / community because again we're looking at not just inside your district but even your broad community members, leaders, relationships in that way, how how do we create conditions to advance equity? Session 4, as you're engaging families and communities in this kind of educational equity reform, this is really about telling your story, right? And so how do you talk about equity in a way that builds allies and garners support and doesn't turn people off or kind of take people away from the table? And then you'll see that there's this sort of breakup in the fellowship experience. So those 4 sessions will happen essentially in a 12-month period. Then there will be 6 months of intensive follow-up. So that's where you would see the coaching and technical assistance really ramping up, where folks could be supporting you in your districts. They could be supporting you through virtual coaching, lots of different ways, but it will be intensified during that 6 months. And then that last session for the particular cohort would be that session 5, where you would come back together with the cohort, with your network, and this is where you would be talking about the action that you may have taken back in your districts and really getting some lessons learned and kind of coaching and supporting of each other in that final session. So I'm going to stop there and offer the wisdom and wonderful expertise of Dr. Carol Johnson to you all. And again, Carol has been an essential friend in this for us because she brings a long body of experience in terms of being a superintendent. She's someone who's currently working with education leaders, and we wanted to make sure that as we were designing this, we weren't designing it outside of the districts, that we weren't sort of in a bubble designing, but that we really had someone who understood all the complicated issues that go into trying to lead a school district. And so Carol really has been an advisor for us throughout this design process. So I'm going to turn it over to Carol and ask Carol to offer some insight as a former superintendent and as someone who's currently working with education leaders as to why she thinks this opportunity might be good for folks that have registered and are obviously interested in hearing more about this network. So, Carol?
Thanks a lot, Leah, and I really want to commend the Southern Education Foundation and Kent McGuire and Leah Austin and others who've really been engaged in this. And the other thing I want to emphasize is that while I've certainly been interested in the conversation, the Southern Education Foundation has reached out beyond just talking to me, but to a number of educators and practitioners and others, leaders who are interested in a more intentional focus on addressing the persistent gaps in performance and the persistent inequality that results in some students being successful, some students getting to college and career standards, and other students not. And so I think that what's unique about this opportunity is that it really has an intentional focus on where we see that persistence, and that persistence certainly exists with race, and it exists in issues of poverty, and it exists in where students have really an opportunity to learn. I think that the size and scope of the work that is planned out allows for a lot of intimate conversations about what leaders confront every single day, and allows some reflective time and also introduces some new models and strategies for thinking about how to move forward. I think that sometimes leaders, superintendents, people like myself, we've been in positions where we're trying to make a difference, but we may not have all the tools or all the strategies or all the reflective time to network with others who are dealing with very similar situations. And so I think this actually takes a multiple prong approach to it. First, really looking at, as I said, a much more focused attention on race and inequality. And then secondly, looking at what other people have done in the area where they've seen results and bringing some of those new models forward so to see if they can be brought to scale. There is another area that's really, really, I think, important, And because so much of what we see is really very systemic. It's so built into the structure of how we do things in schools, and particularly in schools serving very vulnerable populations, that it almost is routine. And so to unpack the policies and the systems of inequality, one has to look at everything from how students get sorted in place, how resources get distributed, whose voices are at the table when decisions are being made, and how, and not just the what, but the how things get implemented over time. And so I think that each of these sessions tries to take a component of the inequality, the new models around accountability, the specific system. And then I think so much of what we do when we talk about engaging families in the community revolves around just telling families what we're thinking about and asking for their input, as opposed to really thinking about the role of families in improving student achievement and really being very planful of getting those voices articulated and part of the equity conversation. I think there's no better place to learn than in a network of other individuals who are like-minded, who are interested in this kind of work, who understanding that learning, as Michael Fulton always says, learning is the work, and that you're networking with a variety of other people who are confronted with these challenges. And then the fact that the focus of this opportunity is really focused on an authentic problem of practice that an individual may have that's working in a leadership role, gives you a chance to really work and get buy-in from your community, but also to really think about how you can learn, but then be simultaneously going through some kind of action cycle where you're trying to apply those learnings to a real authentic equity challenge within your district. I think this is really going to be an experiment of sorts, because we've had lots of networking opportunities somehow in the past, but the focus of this one on really the significant gaps that exist in both achievement and access gaps make it, I think, much more unique and much more of an integrated plan for leaders interested in fostering a strong racial equity agenda and addressing our academic challenges that are not necessarily moving as fast as we would like. It's really helping us to really, and I guess what I want to say is I think that this experiment allows us to really do some really in-depth work with people who really are committed to this, the intentionality of this focus. I will stop there in case.
Thank you, Dr. Johnson. That was wonderful. We want to go ahead and open it up to the audience. Just if we have any questions, you can go ahead and chat your questions right in the chat window, and we'll go ahead and read them aloud. If you have any questions for Dr. Johnson or Dr. Austin. Give a few seconds here. We have one question for Dr. Johnson. Why is it important that this network serves urban, suburban, and rural school districts?
Well, I think that this is a really good question, because I think that sometimes we think that all the challenges in terms of equity are within the urban school community. And there certainly are a number of challenges in the urban school communities, and because they tend to be large, they are magnified at a level where they're elevated, they're reported in the newspaper, and we're challenged by them. On the other hand, I know that there are a lot of rural communities who struggle with these same issues of opportunity to learn, who struggle with the same issues of policies and practices that foster inequality, who struggle also with how to engage families who are also very busy and sometimes not necessarily understanding how their role can impact schooling in a real way. So I think that none of the school districts, not urban, suburban, or rural, are without the challenge of issues of equity and I will say this, there's a growing, certainly a growing and more diverse population of students coming. And I think we know from the U.S. Census Bureau, we know from a number of data sources that the number of students entering kindergarten for the first time in our nation, the majority of them are students of color. So it doesn't really matter whether you're going to be in an urban district or rural district or suburban district, you are going to be in the future in American education, you're going to be confronted with racial diversity. And I think that's even more important now to help people prepare for the racial, cultural, and linguistic diversity that really will be showing up right on their doorstep. And that's not just true for urban districts. It's true for leaders of all kinds of districts. And so I think that the Southern Education Foundation is wise to broaden their tent, to broaden the discussion, so we can see how these materialize, how these operationalize in different settings. I think that'll give us some learning that can be applied in multiple settings.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Dr. Johnson. We have a question here for Dr. Austin. Does the design team need to be fully named prior to the application? My system is going through a community application process to build a larger advisory team, and I'm hoping to pull community member representatives from that group.
Great question. Thank you for that. So I would say that what we would like to know in the application process is the kinds of roles that would be part of a design team. So if it's a design team, like in this example, where it's not already in existence or you can't quite fully name individuals right now, that would be fine with us. What we would really love to see or understand is what's the kind of design team that you feel like you want to pull together that's going to be committed to this process and will really be able to do the work is, quite frankly, what we're most interested in. And so that's the sort of explaining that we would want to see in the application and be able to understand. So the short answer is no, it does not need to be fully named, but we definitely would want to understand, you know, what the roles are and the commitment that folks would be able to make to the process.
And Leah, if I could add, I think that one thing that would be really helpful for individuals applying to begin to think about how they will approach people to participate, what process they will use, or how will they make sure that they have the diversity of representation on their advisory committee, and then how do they make sure that those folks are really committed to this endeavor so that they stay with it long enough to get through the process and the results that we would like to see.
Absolutely.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you very much. I think we're going to return now unless there are any other questions. There will be another section for question and answer after we go through the next few slides.
Yep. So just really wanted to, you know, we know that we threw a lot of information out there, and so these next couple of slides are really just sort of reminders of what the program eligibility is and a bit on the application process. And then, as Micah said, we will circle back to see if there are any more questions. So just in terms of program eligibility, we are interested in working with cabinet-level district leaders in the South. As we've mentioned before, we're actually really interested in a diverse cohort, so rural, urban, or suburban districts are also open to your traditional public schools as well as charter schools, excuse me. What we really want is that commitment to reducing inequities and at the same time the ability to exhibit some readiness to actually implement some change or really have, and that speaks back to the commitment of not just the fellow, not even just the team, but really being able to demonstrate that there's commitment at the system level, that the folks would feel like they can go back and there's work that can really be done. You know, not expecting that the problem will be solved. We know that that's not going to happen, but really just want to make sure that it's an experience where leaders feel supported, and we think that that support will come if they're in a district that exhibits some readiness and maybe just needs an extra push, and this experience might be that extra push. Again, really need leaders and the fellows to be available and committed to attending all of the sessions, and again, there'll be 5 two-day sessions. And we will get the session dates, the confirmed dates to people as soon as we close the application process, which I'll talk about on the next slide, but we will ensure that fellows who are accepted have plenty of time to actually get these dates on calendars, get any sort of approvals and things that they'll need in order to commit to those sessions. And then lastly, being able to identify and support the involvement of their design team. And we think a good membership number for that team is between 5 and 7. You don't want it too big that you kind of, you know, it's unwieldy and you lose control of the group, but also don't want it to be too small that if someone was to have to bow out or for whatever reason you, you know, lose a person, that you aren't in a situation where now you just have 2 people that are your team. And then in terms of the
can I just add one other thought to that? This is Cheryl Johnson.
Absolutely.
And I want to emphasize the word that Leah used about committed. This is really hard work to get people to shift their mindsets from attributing the issues of underachievement to the students versus to understanding the action steps that the leaders and the adults have to take. And so you have to really be committed to move beyond some of the excuses that we traditionally come up with when we don't see the outcomes we want, to really thinking about what the leadership action steps that must be taken in order to see different results, and then how you as a leader will work with your team to get there. And so I guess I would just emphasize the word that Leah has used multiple times, and it is about the commitment, because it really does require a level of commitment and courage to take on some of these issues that have really been barriers to student success, to all students achieving.
Thank you. So more details about the fellowship and the actual application are available on our website, and you can find the link here on this slide. Want to emphasize that for priority consideration, we're encouraging participants to apply by January 3rd. However, we are going to accept applications on a rolling basis until March 1st, and those dates should be 2017. But yes, so we will accept applications on a rolling basis. Yeah, and I will stop there, and then again, Micah, I guess we'll facilitate if there are some more questions that folks have.
Thank you, Dr. Johnson and Dr. Austin. We are just going to move to our final question and answer session. If anyone has any questions that they would like to pose about the application or would like to just ask a direct question to our panelists, feel free. Again, you can type it right into the chat window in the bottom right-hand corner. All right, it looks like we have a question here from an attendee. This looks like it's for Dr. Austin. What kind of experience should fellows expect to gain through their participation in the Racial Equity Leadership Network?
So I would describe the experience in a couple of ways. I mean, I think that given the nature of the topic, you can bet that it's going to be intense. You know, I think that we are creating a space for leaders to have some real honest and authentic conversations we're hoping that people will feel that they trust their other cohort members. I mean, the network part of this is really important to us, that leaders are coming together and really are able to build the trust with each other, where they're not just talking about racial equity or talking about equity kind of in broad strokes, but are actually talking about and solving for and working together to talk about things that are, quite frankly, real time, right, that are happening in their district that Monday when they get back, so that they're feeling like I can talk about this very real, practical issue, but with people who I trust, who will keep the space safe to engage in these kind of conversations. And we also, always want to sort of combine it with some fun and just, we are putting together sort of a menu of supports, so that when folks are coming together for the sessions, there will be, a dinner where you're not only coming to listen to someone speak, right? We're hoping that we'll be able to have some engaging and innovative thought leaders who would come and engage in a very intimate way with these leaders, be able to ask questions to researchers like Linda Darling-Hammond, who you may not ever get to interact with, but this would give you the opportunity to really, I love Carol used the term problem of practice, but yet you may really get to lift up a problem to someone, like Linda Darling-Hammond, who's done a lot of research on these issues, and feel like this is a safe space to do that, but also a space that's sort of pushing people to maybe engage in some ways that they have not been able to do before.
So I might add to that. I think that Leah early on used the word engage, she used the word leverage, and then she used the word action. So I think that you should expect to be challenged to think, and that's going to happen through some of the exposure to some of the speakers, as she outlined, and some of it's going to happen because you're engaging with others with similarly situated issues. I think that sometimes we operate in isolation as leaders, and so we don't have a safe space to talk about our frustrations or what we have observed, or to question ourselves. And so the other piece of this is leveraging the opportunity to really reflect on your own personal learning journey and your own personal reflections about whether and how you made a difference in the work that you're carrying out. Because at the end of the day, we're all accountable for the results that we try to get. And so this reflective space is a place, I think, where we can begin to articulate, where we're making progress, and also acknowledge that we're not always making progress as rapidly as we want to. And whenever you take on something like a specific issue, whether it's an actual practice or whether it's an actual policy that is specific for a long time but perpetuates inequality, you're going to have to assemble and kind of broaden the number of people who are involved in the conversation so that you can influence the public policy. I think that you'll have an opportunity to articulate some of that and then get ideas and suggestions from other people about how you might approach a change in a particular policy so that you can map out a longer-term strategy for getting different results than you might have today.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. This question is for either panelist. What suggestions do you all have for selecting an in-district design team?
So I'll jump in and say that I think suggestions I would offer are, one, to be thinking about roles. So to be thinking about what is the action you want to take, or what's the sort of real practical work that you want to do, and then who are the people that you need to carve out time to sit down with to actually attack that issue, attack that problem. I think is one suggestion that I would offer. I also really appreciate the question that came in a few minutes ago, naming, you know, a real interest in having a broad team so that you're not just selecting sort of people you work with inside the district on a daily basis, but thinking about community leaders and thinking about community just in a broad way. That could be, you know, a parent, it could be business leaders, whomever, but really thinking sort of broadly speaking, what's the right composition configuration that you need to move an agenda item forward, and really, you know, who are folks that you maybe don't always get to sit down with but really need to sit down with, and this will allow you to carve out that time and space to do so.
Thank you. Thank you. We'll take this final question so we can move on to the end of our presentation. Am I expected to have expert-level knowledge on racial equity to apply for this program? I pose that to Dr. Austin.
So I think my response to that is no. Not 100% clear on what expert-level knowledge, that could mean different things to different people. I mean, I think that a fellow or district who is clear, right, that there are some issues around equity to wrestle with that's the sort of level of knowledge that we would be expecting. So this isn't necessarily a program for folks who may have to convince their district that there's some issues here, but more so for people who know that there's something to wrestle with and maybe just need the time, need the space, need peers to work through these issues with, is how I would look at it versus, you know, we're not expecting that you are a researcher who, you know, studies racial equity on a daily basis. It's much more of an expectation that this will help you move forward on an issue and not necessarily having to convince people that this is an issue in the district.
I would say also, if I could just add, I think we're also in a learning environment. I think that we had solved the issue of racial equality or racial equity in this country, we probably wouldn't be having this conversation. So I think that you should approach this as an opportunity to learn, an opportunity to learn with a group of other colleagues, and then to work on a project that's really important to you within your own district. And so I think to that extent, you probably should come with the will to address the issue, if not having all the skills when you enter the program.
Oh, thank you, Dr. Johnson. Completely agree. We have one last question. I think we have a little bit of time for it. Who will be the primary coaches available to fellows?
And actually, that's a good segue to our kind of who our partners are. So, again, this is funded by the Atlantic Philanthropies. In terms of sort of the coaching and some of the partners who are helping with the implementation, so the National Equity Project, who is a nonprofit organization that just does phenomenal work around equity, working on problems or issues of equity in complex systems is kind of their bend, so it makes total sense for them to partner with us. They will be facilitating the sessions and will also be providing coaching and technical assistance supports that folks might need. The Learning Policy Institute is another partner of ours. They are going to be supporting us on research and documentation. So I'm purposely not using the word evaluation because what we're hoping to do is document this experience for folks as a learning tool, not so much as like an evaluation to see if there was like a pass or fail, but really being able to document how folks are learning. Part of what they're also going to do with us is produce some learning cases, sort of like case studies, that will become part of the curriculum, but will also, I'm really excited about this, they will be available for, this is where the coaching piece comes in, our technical assistance. If a district was interested in documenting their experience, documenting the work they're doing, and producing some sort of learning case that they could then share, that we could share with the broader field, Learning Policy Institute is going to be a resource in that way as well. And then lastly, Healthy Schools campaign have been serving as advisors on the design of the program. They are an organization that focuses, as the name sort of alludes to, they focus on issues of health in schools. And so they are also going to be available to support folks who might want coaching or technical assistance that's very focused on health. And that can be student well-being, that could be school climate issues. They're another example of a partner that's on board right now that's going to help in that way. And then we also have some communications consulting group that's going to help us, and they would be available if people are, if districts are interested in the sort of communication support that we used as an example earlier in the webinar.
Thank you very much, Drs. Johnson and Dr. Austin. We are out of time, but once again, I would like to thank everyone for joining us today. If you have additional questions, you can reach out to us using the following mediums. For program-related questions, please send us an email at racialequity@southerneducation.org, or for media-related inquiries, you may contact our Director of Marketing and Communications, Autumn Blanchard, at ablanchard@southerneducation.org. I would like to thank everyone again, and thank you, Dr. Johnson.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Austin.
Thank you.
You all have a wonderful day.
Thanks, everybody.